you could see how scared I am inside. All the things I do not know, I try and hide. I would take a chance with you toward the sky if you promise me you'll fly. Leave it at the gate. No, it's not too late. If this is where you'd like to be, here with me, yeah. Fly with me, fly with me.
And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast. Another week, another podcast on a roll. This week we bring our September guest a little late, but we're happy to have her in October. October will now be a double guest month. Ooh.
We're making up for our September.
Right. If the song you heard at the top of the show is "Fly with Me" by our guest Rashmi, so welcome.
Thank you.
So glad I was able to get you on. I met Rashmi at the Way Station, where I meet all local musicians these days.
Well, it's pretty much a hub for local musicians in Lower Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Or
Is
even
this
like
just
Brooklyn.
the Way Station podcast at this point?
Well, not quite.
We wanted
We
to
haven't
be
Based on our guest list.
Well, we haven't had the purveyor of the Way Station on yet, though we're working on that.
And we also still are trying to figure out how to do a podcast in
There.
the Way Station. It's just a little noisy.
And so thank you for agreeing to do the show and performing. The song was great. I really like "Fly With Me," though I'm familiar with your EP, Rainstorm. These, you inform me, the songs you're performing today are from a new record coming out.
Yes, we're, I and my band, we are rehearsing right now to record the next album. And hopefully we'll do that this month.
Cool.
And then it should be out like December or January. So everything I sing on the show today is new.
Great. And
That unreleased.
unreleased. And what's the name of the new record?
It'll be called Puzzle.
Cool.
Which is the name of another song.
Excellent. Awesome. Very cool.
Puzzle. How puzzling.
Exactly.
I had to do it.
Yeah, of course you did. So thank you for coming on the show, and you brought us Madonna's True Blue.
That's right.
So what made you choose this record?
It's a classic. It's just really great pop music. And I just really love how just the sound of it in terms of like the production and how it I don't know, I feel like it's her quintessential album. It's really a fun CD with a lot of, it actually has a lot of variety, even though sometimes you would think that it wouldn't. It really is just a really great CD.
It has variety within a certain framework, because
Correct.
obviously this is a retro album. We should point out it's 1986. It's a Madonna
Well,
highlight of her career.
It's not
Right,
1986.
it's not right.
We're
It-
2014. The album.
It is 1920, referring to it, the thing
Yeah.
that we're doing. And obviously it's going to be embedded in that time period. And to be fair, we don't usually do retro reviews, but we try to encompass the fact that it is of its time. So we're looking through the lens of its time, kind of ignoring what came out recently, because obviously a review couldn't count that stuff.
Yeah.
Because obviously then you can't,
At the time,
attribute
it
a
didn't
number.
exist.
Yeah.
I mean, you can review it on its impact in modern music culture too, but that's a different kind of review too.
Yeah, that would be very different.
Yeah.
I would say treat it as the pop that came out for its time, which was very influential to modern stuff, so I think it's appropriate.
And there's a lot of connection back and forth that we make throughout listening to the album. So, and it actually been a while since I've heard this record, but after listening to it, I went, oh, I know that song, and that song, and that song.
Though
I
for
forgot-
me, there was one or two that I didn't quite remember, or even I don't think I may have even heard before. So that was fun itself.
to just discover new Madonna stuff so much later on.
Well, it's not really new.
But
I had
new
never
for you.
gone through
Yeah.
her entire discography before. In fact, this is the first Madonna album I've ever listened to in its entirety. So,
Really?
yeah, no, really.
Lucky you.
And so we'll get right into the first track, which was one of her huge hits that year too. I think it was the first single off the record, which is "Papa Don't Preach," which is probably one of her more well-known songs.
Papa Don't Preach. And true.
I'm in
Back
trouble
to
deep.
It
The
has
sexiest track on the album,
This-
clearly.
A joke for
As
off
the joke
air.
was made.
Yeah.
Papa Don't Preach is At least of the time, and even nowadays, I would consider it definitely a little bit of a turn from your standard pop song, only because of the content itself. It's a coming of an age, but on a different take that you normally don't see. Instead of being I'm all grown up right now, it actually is a specific one-on-one kind of an idea. That's a very unusual, and that's really appreciative. This is one of the few times. I think Madonna is one of the few times where I can go, the lyrics are really good. One of the few pop stars outside of like the other true super hits like Paul McCartney or Michael Jackson, where the lyrics are as influential as the music itself because of the content it brings to the table.
I'm going to argue on one thing here, because I would not say that the lyrics themselves, I mean, I think they're good, but I don't think it's necessarily a new concept. I think there's definitely been that one-on-one idea going back to 50s pop songs.
But
definitely
in that
the kind of
case,
stuff you'd find in the Beatles.
That
one-on-one
case, it tends to be a
concept exists.
slower. This is a much more energized song. You usually get a more contemplated, slower idea. It's a weird combination.
That's why the way in which this is pushing boundaries, as far as I'm concerned, is all based on the music. It's based on the fact that there's much more time spent to explore the mood of this one-on-one dynamic. For instance, the intro is considerably long for an intro. You get this sort of swelling string.
Great violins.
Yeah, great violin work in general, and it's considerable length. For a pop song, it's odd. It goes on for somewhere upwards of 35 seconds, which doesn't seem long in the grand scheme of things, but for pop, that's a long time. That's like a decade.
Well, I also really like that the emotionality of this song is it starts off as this confident, like, you know, Dad, don't tell me what to do. I'm an adult. I can handle myself. But it leads very quickly into, but I'm in a lot of trouble and I need your help. So it's this kind of wishy-washy young adult stance, which, I mean, I don't think a lot of songs were singing about at the time. And so I think it's very interesting for her to take that stance and make it seems very personal. Even if it's not about a discussion she had with her father, it's very identifiable and relatable.
Well, perhaps one of the reasons I subconsciously thought the Beatles is only because of the song She's Leaving Home.
Yeah.
Which is almost kind of similar in that way. It explores it in a very, very shallow way, only because, you know, it doesn't go deep into the reasons why. It's almost just face value. She's leaving home because she's clearly dissatisfied. And it doesn't imply that it's necessarily parents or that it's necessarily a guy in her life. It's just she's leaving home. But it seems to be for kind of those reasons. And it explains it in a very shallow sense. You get that kind of stuff throughout the 60s and 70s. Perhaps this is strong by just kind of going for the throat.
Well, yeah, it's very personal. It's very specific. I mean, you know, it's
got a really great narrative quality. It tells a story, and I remember that I've seen the video since for a few times, and it's actually a really great storytelling video, which was another great feature of the times. I don't think it's done as much anymore, but Michael Jackson and Madonna really made. I think they really made music videos and and art. Before then, it was just like live bands throwing their guitars around, and then Michael. Thriller was a story, a mini movie, and Papa Don't Preach is a mini movie. Danny Aiello's in it. It's really well directed, and it's just the song tells a story, and it has a very strong point of view, and one of the reasons. And it's a great, the violins, it's well produced.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it.
And it's a great way to kick off the album, too.
Yes.
It's the showmanship, theatrical factor, I think, is what the 80s really introduced, and certainly Madonna was one of the big ones in that department. The other thing this track has going for it is it's kind of infectious just in terms of the rhythm. I mean, it seems like just a simple choice, but a lot of emphasis on the 2 and the 4. In your 4/4 measure, just really, really powerful on the 2 and the 4, and that kind of keeps this sort of ebbing and flowing going along with it.
Yeah.
But it's almost odd when you consider that there's clear pain going on here. At the same time, that's meant to sort of highlight the attitude within this.
Mm-hmm.
Papa Don't Preach. It's definitely that. It sounds like it's coming from a point of teenage angst.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's at a time when, angst wasn't just dark and miserable, and it's adding a dimension of realism to it, which, with the narrative video, is something Madonna did a lot. I mean, all of her biggest hits had great narrative videos or had some kind of story or some kind of impact. She never just kind of really ever did anything for the sake of it. There was always something behind it, whether it was a message or an emotionality or whatever. And this song, to start an album with such a heavy message, is powerful and palpable. And I think it really, gives a good farm ground for the album to start on, to take off from.
It's a really strong opener. I mean, there's several things that this has going for it, over that of just pop music in general, and over that of just 80s pop music in general, and over that of just Madonna's work, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of things to focus on. I mean, immediately, of course, you're brought in by those strings. And then, secondly, you're focused on the drum box, which is a lot more intricate than you would normally find it in other 80s material. Even despite that back and forth with the emphasis on the 2 and the 4, there's a lot more detail going on in there. And then, of course, the fact that the track itself is rather long. It's upwards of, I think, 5.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
That's unheard of.
For the time, yeah, for sure.
For the time, yeah.
The original...
Certainly for today.
I remember Rashmi saying when we were listening that it seemed longer than, and a little different from what you remembered.
Yeah.
And it's because the album versions, a lot of pop albums in the 80s, the album versions of the hits were different from the radio edits. They would edit the song down to a safe 3 minutes because they didn't believe people would listen for that long. Since then, they don't really do that as much. Songs, just by nature, have gotten shorter recently.
And actually, there's a part in this song where the instrumentation kind of cuts out a little bit, and I believe that was one of the examples of a section which I don't believe this song was immune to what you're describing.
Oh no, for
it
sure
too
not.
was probably cut. In fact, did you mention that there was a part, Rashmi, that you felt was cut in this version?
Yeah, I think when you were playing it, the end
Yeah.
is much longer. The ending is extended.
Yeah, that's the section that the instrumentation sort of drops out, and then you're sort of just hearing that background of Papa Don't Preach,
Right.
Papa Don't Preach, and everything's a lot thinner. You don't have that sort of overbearing drum box as you did before, and that section goes on for a considerable 30 seconds before we return to yet another chorus, and it's powerful in the way that there's multi-layering going on through the course of this that it doesn't really make me tire out. To be honest.
And I imagine the lyrics, I mean, from a lyrical perspective, they're not super complicated, but they're poignant. And I think that's where the power comes from.
It's the combination of the pleading idea of "Don't stop loving me, Daddy" to the whole "I'm going to do this on my own. I'm keeping this baby." The defiance. It's the back and forth that really is what conveys the content. For the lack of complication, the message is meant to be simple.
But I don't believe it's really lacking complication in this particular track. Granted, as we get further in this album, there's certain moments where you could say, maybe
Well, I
this
think
could have
he's
been
only
fixed
speaking
a little
lyrically.
more.
Lyrically,
He's speaking lyrically.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what
just
I'm saying.
lyrically.
Just
speaking
lyrically.
lyrically.
Just in terms of
Yeah.
We're just
emotional
talking about
drama.
lyrics.
It's very straightforward storytelling, but it's the framework that works so well here to create just power, just a great message through, and it's one of the reasons why I think this has become one of her timeless classics. More than a lot of her party songs or things like that, I'd be more expecting to hear this on a quote retro part, an 80s pop part, because it's got power even today.
I think it's because it's the quintessential song of attitude.
Yeah.
And you see that in all these elements in here, not just in the rhythm, but in the robust bass. That was something I really noticed. The bass is really, apart from the drum box itself, a lot of time the drum box is doubling the bass work. And the bass is again, robust is the only word I can come up for it. It is strong, it's impactful in a sense that it's not really clean like you would find in 1970s classic rock. Mm-hmm. It's in your face and kind of rounded, if that makes any sense. But I'm sure it's helped by the fact that it's accompanied with the drum box.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of drum box on this record, but she's always used a lot of technology in her music.
It gives it an edge.
Yeah.
And again, that's another thing. You can't help but say it defined the 80s. And
yeah, for sure.
We see that through the lens of today, and that'll come up later.
And this song had this great, I feel, where she's really trying to, you guys were saying this, she's somebody's daughter, and she still wants to have his love and approval, and at the same time she's trying to take a stand as a woman to be with her lover and have this baby, which was a very difficult, decision. So it's this really interesting... It contains both, this interesting,
It shows that even the
both.
main character, whether it's actually Madonna or she's taking the character of a lead, she's really confused. She's not confident. She sounds confident but doesn't, and she's confused. She doesn't actually know what she needs or
vulnerable
wants.
piece.
And in that sense, it's kind of, it's approaching theme work that I think is novel for the 80s.
Yeah.
Not that it's novel in the history of time, obviously, that's been, but it was kind of frowned on as like a pop music subject.
Yeah, but that's
for a
not
long
something
time.
people would just sing about,
Right.
and she did.
And that,
Yes.
that I think is her long-lasting legacy, which is
Well,
perfectly
she's done
found
tons of
here in
that
the first
stuff.
track.
Yeah, sure. I
Really
still
good
remember
point.
Living on a Prayer. Not Living on a Prayer. I keep doing that. Like a Prayer. Everyone was up in arms about the actor cast to play this depiction of Jesus in that video, and
Yeah.
people lost it. But she didn't care. She was going for this message and creating this specific image, and she's done that a lot over her career.
To be fair, of course, by today's standards, it seems so tame.
Right, of course.
You know,
Well, sure. But at the time, it wasn't.
yeah.
I think it's a good place to go into track 2, which is "Open Your Heart," which is I believe the second single off the record, for sure, a single off this record that I remember very fondly because I remember the hook, the keyboard hook on this song. That it's only a few chords, but I remember them, and they as soon as I heard the song, it got stuck in my head again. I just remembered it. But this is where we get kind of a sense of... I mean, Madonna's gone on record and said she's not a strong singer. She can sing, but she's not...
Right.
her vocals are not her concentration. It's everything else.
It has to do with inflection and also the core melody itself. Very often, if the melody is strong, then you don't need as strong of a singer in order to phrase it.
Right, and
You just
so...
need to kind of adhere to the music.
It was less noticeable in Papa Don't Preach, but in Open Your Heart, the verses, we get a sense of that kind of strain to hit the same stride she was in the previous song. And it by no means sounds bad, it's just you can tell that singing's not her absolute pinnacle strength. It's how she phrases what she sings.
Well, there's a couple things that I think leave this song as more of a gaping hole, and that's just because of the fact that, for instance, the synth it's not as intricate. You don't
Right.
really have all the same glitter that you had in the first track. Instead, here, everything is a lot more regular. It's somewhat similar in overall tone, so you're not bombarded with this is a whole new thing she's doing. Instead, it's just a slightly more regular version of the previous track. And I think in that sense, it kind of leaves her a lot more exposed. Rashmi, you used the word vulnerable before. I think that's a good way to describe it, because the second you take out all of that glitter, all that's left is just her voice, which is good, but then you start comparing it against other stuff you've heard. It's almost impossible not to. And it's just like, okay, that's a decent melody, but, give me something else. And you're looking for that other thing. It's not quite here in this song.
The chorus has the vulnerability to it. Very well done. The melody does pick up. The music does pick up during the choruses.
No,
But
the verses
it just shows that a little bit of weakness. And I think it's also coupled with the fact that we have the same level of energy as the previous track, as a lot of her music, a lot of her faster music. It's there, but there's less of a supporting cast for that energy. And the energy is not coming across with the vocals, which is where you would expect it to step up.
I don't mean to confuse laziness with ability, but it does seem that in these verses, it feels like it got a little bit lazy. Even if she could be, singing at her peak and she just doesn't have as much to work with, it comes across as being a little bit lazy. I
mean, it could also be with this song. There's less of a strong narrative. Like the first song had such a strong narrative, strong message, strong music. So all of anything else kind of would fall behind it. Whereas this, it's mostly her vocals and this. This wanting to be loved kind of track, which is a vulnerable track, and whether it was intentional or not, which it could be, it's definitely a more vulnerable track that just doesn't have as much content.
I think partially that has to do with the cliches in the lyrics here, but which in this case definitely even cliche for the time. For instance, just the chorus itself: "Open your heart to me, baby. I hold the lock and you hold the key. Open your heart to me, darling. I'll give you love if you turn the key." I mean, it's comparing a heart to a lock and to a lock that someone needs the key in order to get to.
Yeah.
That sort of forbidden love kind of thing, or the secret that you have to know in order to get to someone's heart. It's been done. Done. Not to say that it's not necessarily a timeless theme, but you kind of have to cloud it.
Well, I think also this isn't as personal. Well, it's still a personal song because it's about her and her being vulnerable. It's not as personal as something like Papa Don't Preach. Like, it's a much broader topic, the idea of wanting to be loved and to try and find someone who can unlock your love.
I think this is less about her being vulnerable necessarily. Yeah. It's really more about her actually desiring to put herself out there in a sense. It's wanting someone else to have less of a wall up.
But I'm just saying it's definitely a more vague topic. It's a more broad topic than the first song was. The song is a very specific situation between a daughter and a father, and a baby and a boyfriend that is questionable. Like, this is something that's almost hyper specific, definitely a lot more specific than just this second song. And I think that's also what kind of holds it back a bit.
That said, I'm going to give it some points here, especially in the chorus. If you ignore those lyrics, I kind of do like the melody in the chorus.
The music, I think, is much stronger.
I've said my piece about the verses, but
I think everything's leading to the chorus.
Yeah, everything kind of builds up to it, and there's this tendency that she has in these choruses to sort of pulsate with the rhythm. So even if you don't detect the same sort of level of singing, she can really work with her surroundings very, very well. She sort of sways in and out with that drum box. And if she follows along with it, then you kind of have this duality of the two working in tandem, which is not something that vocalists often do, because a lot of times vocalists like to be independent of the rhythms and sort of soar above it. But in this particular case, she stays in line with it, which could be construed as being safe, but it works, because normally you don't get that duality.
Yeah. I think that also following a song like Papa Don't Preach, it's going to be hard for this song to be as impactful, just because... And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. When you follow up something that's kind of got everything in it, the next song is going to look weak just by comparison. It's almost impossible to live up to a song like that, And so I think Open Your Heart, we were going to look at a little more narrowly just because of what it was following.
I think it comes down to that core inspiration of the idea.
Yeah.
If, as you said, the theme is a little bit weaker, if it pales in comparison, or is a little more broader, I think that's the best way to put it, then you're just you're ending up with a lighter theme. I mean, it's not something that kind of like, yes, the music just came to me because I had that idea in my head. Instead, in this case, it's more like, well, I have to fill in music for this role.
Yeah.
So, let's just see how it pans out at the end. And it shows.
And it's by no means a bad song. It's just, I don't think it's as good as the first track. And, she's done better tracks than this one. So that's, I think, why it stands out so much.
All right.
Let's head on now to White Heat, which is the third track, which Steve gave me some insight to the track that I wasn't even really aware of. So the interesting about this is, for the time especially, Michael Jackson had done it a bit, and a few other pop artists had, but this features sound bites from James Cagney.
James Cagney, who was a prominent actor in the 30s, and he did a lot of mobster movies, and he was like the head honcho of mobster movie acting at the time. And he had died in 1986, the very year that this album was released.
And so this song pretty much just seems like a straight-up tribute to him, which I think is really...
Which takes a clip from his movie to start out. I don't remember the movie specifically, but, I mean, you might as well just read it out. How do like that, boys? A copper. And we went for it. I went for it. Treated him like a kid brother. And I was going to split 50-50 with that copper. There we were, waiting to pin a medal on him. Come on, get up. Get your hands up. Yeah, that's it. A nice gold medal for the copper. Only maybe he's going to get it sooner than he thinks.
It's just...
It's quaint. And it's actually like a nice little... Considering it's just a singular monologue, it gives you the framework in which to work from.
Yeah.
Captures his entire repertoire, to be honest.
And this song also, I mean, once the actual song kicks in, it's one of those pop songs that is almost impossible to not get wrapped up in. It's just very catchy. And the lyrics, while they seem a little cheesy on the surface, they very much draw you in, because even though it's an obvious metaphor that she makes in the choruses, it's quaint and it's very, it's cute. It draws you into the imagery that she's trying to build with this song that she's dedicating to him.
It's an on-the-nose metaphor.
Sure.
But it does work. When you consider just that chorus, get up, stand tall, put your back up against the wall, because my love is dangerous. This is a bust. So totally, like, really heavy-handed in just this using that movie framework and the themes that surrounded those movies as to go into her manner of conveying love.
Yeah.
The type of love specifically.
Yeah.
Not a fan?
No, I found it a little cheesy.
I mean, but I think
It's
that
so-
was intentional, though.
It's a pop album.
Cheesy's okay. No, you're right. Cheesy is okay. It's a pop album.
It's like,
things
who
like
does
that.
the cheese best?
And the cheese is really good. But it was that level of on the noseness because she's still transitioning. This is before she really became the superstar she eventually became. This is when she was still. This is only her third album.
I think she was
This
there,
is
though.
the
She was there.
album.
This is
This
the
was the
album.
album that transformed her. But in this case, it's still got that nasal, very young sound, and that really kind of hurt it for me because you're trying to do, these kind of on the nose one-liners, but when you're sounding kind of childish, it doesn't come off quite right for me. And that's a big issue I have with this. It still has her very, very bubblegum oriented, where you can hear her just in the pigtails playing cops and robbers, kind of doing it instead of a young woman in her own right, trying to make a little bit of a statement, even if the statement's a little tongue in cheek. It's that kind of just drops it a little for me. And this is nitpicking really vocals, but this is been that's something that I got an issue on this.
I don't know. See, I had a somewhat of a parallel experience with this track, just as I was moving from the first to the second. Obviously, we can't help but compare here. We already said, we love the first track. It kind of blew our mind for an opener to a pop album. Second was bound to pale in comparison. And this was a track that I was almost ready to sort of compare right in line with track 2. I was ready to say, then alright, it's kind of the same exact concept. He's not really wowing me in any way. But there's a funny little thing here. This is a track that sort of lacks verses in a sense. It's more of a bridge-chorus type deal. It goes back to that chorus so readily that I'm not left with that gaping hole again, where it's, the lyrics paling and melody paling by comparison. Instead, it's just, it's all that chorus, which is what we said about the last track too, that it's all building to the chorus. But in this sense, it's less of a build. It hovers around there almost for the duration of this track. So when it keeps coming back to that cool rhythmic effect that this chorus has, because obviously my read-off does not do it justice. Get up, stand tall. There's a certain cadence to the manner that she's singing these lyrics that puts accents on really bizarre places. But at the same time, it's theatrical in the sense that she, using that metaphor, she manages to sing this in such a way that she's actually holding someone up.
Yeah.
It sounds like that. If you look past the fact that it's a song and there's a melody there, the cadence has that forcefulness to it. And I think that's kind of powerful. That ended up reeling me back to the song in the end.
Well, yeah, and she's trying to convey that cadence in an homage to James Cagney. Just give this kind of, she's dangerous. Her love is dangerous because she's a mobster. She's a gangster.
And it's silly theatrical, too.
Of course.
You get up. Bleh. You hear an accent there as if you can actually hear all the hens going up.
Yeah.
Stand tall. More accents.
Yeah.
As if they all just stood to attention because they're terrified.
Yeah.
It's...
it's
something to...
I see where John's coming from with the vocal delivery a bit too, because on her earlier records she does have a lot of that kind of nasally. She sings that way, and she kind of moves away from it as she gets older. And I can understand how it influences your opinion of the song. It didn't bother me as much, but I do prefer her singing when she doesn't get really nasally. I like it either when she takes her voice very low or when she just kind of maintains that breathy singing. When she gets nasally, it's she's singing from her nose. It kind of throws it off a bit.
I guess that's probably the bridge that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Because it seems that this goes back and forth between a bridge more so than it does a verse. The verses are they're so in passing you barely even notice them.
Yeah.
But I would guess the nasal part is the bridge here, which, I don't know, again, I could almost overlook just for the chorus.
Yeah, I like the structure of the song. Mm-hmm. Knowing that it's James Cagney adds a lot to it. Also, I think because when I first heard it, when I was listening to it at work, I was just like, "This is a quote. This is from a movie." Okay, well, I have no idea what movie it's from, but this seems bizarre for Madonna. Just being more accustomed to her recent work, where she hasn't done a lot of this, it's just I was thrown off by it. But then on the second listen, when we were listening to it here, I really got sucked in. Like I believed the narrative. I took it.
I'm leaving out one other glaring thing about this track that I think sort of kept it high for me. It sort of tied the track together such that I didn't have those areas where it felt short. And that was the interludes. There's these funk guitar interludes that stepped in, which is, again, it's something we haven't had before.
Yeah.
Anything new at this point is kind of welcomed. And it managed to sort of step in there between all these verses and the bridges, and every single time it steps in, it's catchy, it's unique, and it makes me feel as if there's less of a glaring transition, like we just went from one section to the other. If it's tied together with something, then you feel much more of a unity in the track. And that's what I felt was lacking in track 2.
I agree. Yes, Steve.
Rah, rah, rah.
You are correct, sir.
Thanks for that, John. So now we go to the third single from the record. Again, I don't know if these are in order. It's
Third
the
single,
fourth track, third single. Live to Tell, which this also was another one where the synth work is by far more memorable to me than the actual lyrics. Because a lot of the verses I don't really remember
I get
as
a
well.
rant.
I remember...
I
remember the synth work. Those, what was it, 3 notes, 4 notes?
This intro I thought was downright gorgeous. I think this intro was perhaps even more powerful than the first track in many ways because it takes it in a different direction. It's a little bit less pizzazz, but much more introverted.
It's a ballad to say from the start.
Very slow, very deliberate, and I honestly you get this sense that it's building. It's the setting for a movie. Some kind of drama that is unwritten, but just fill it in your head. And it begins by sort of breaking apart this D minor 11th chord by establishing the root and the bass, and then these high synths step in to start accenting the 9th, 7th, and then interestingly down to the 11th, of the scale, which I thought was really interesting. It was an interesting final choice to sort of end these little accents on the uppermost partial because it kind of keeps you engorged in the fullness of that chord. Because you're already set up with the 11th. The 11th is sort of there as a block chord, throughout. But when these accents start breaking apart the chord, it was just interesting that it sort of went down from the 9th to the 7th, which makes it seem as if it's about to sort of simplify it, and then it ends on the 11th. But that's just, it's good voicing. It's great voicing, and I guess we owe that to the production values. What were the names again, Rashmi?
Stephen Bray and Patrick Leonard. I'm not sure who of those two did this song.
Leonard was on this one.
Okay.
And actually, Leonard did a lot of work on this album. He was I believe the primary.
Okay.
But now there's an interesting second stage to this, because the second chord here kind of hikes up to the relative major, F major, and it's accompanied by much more playful synth work. And together, this kind of releases that darkness that we had earlier, just for a time, before throwing you back into D minor territory with the slow, deliberate voicing again. And it's kind of this weird back and forth between one thing and the other that it makes you feel as if this wants to sort of leave that dark place, but it never quite does. Because
but I like that dichotomy that it builds throughout the song. And I, if I recall the lyrics well enough, they kind of support that, don't they, John?
There's a part of me that wants to immerse, but
There is. One thing to know about this song specifically, it was actually written for a movie as well. That's something to keep in mind because the lyrics themselves are speaking to sort of a scene work that's being developed here. It is a little bit off the beaten track as well as what you would expect for pop. It being slower, being more ballad-oriented, yet still staying within the realm. The lyrics are also being more ballad-oriented, yet still staying within the idea of very straightforward. Because it's talking more along the lines of being deceitful and secretive and that sort of a situation. The idea, it's almost a fearful kind of ballad without really making you be afraid. It implies apprehension. There's a lot going on here.
It's dramatic.
Now that's really interesting.
That's the whole thing. It creates a full dramatic range.
That's really interesting when you consider the verses. Because once the song, obviously I was describing the intro before, so that's the setting that you're dealing with. And then the second it goes into the song itself, then it pulls back such that we're not in D minor anymore, we're in C major. And C major is much more open, it's much more forgiving in many ways. Yeah. Kind of like it's masking something though, because at the same time, it starts pivoting. Just barely, it pivots to the minor fifth, G minor, and that's kind of an odd thing because in the manner in which it's doing sort of triad cadences here, it comes across as a hymnal. I mean, hymnals in many ways are supposed to kind of release you. They're supposed to sort of make you feel redeemed. Exactly. They're very open chords, very non-confrontational. At the same point, though, going to the minor fifth is a little odd as far as hymnals are concerned. They would be a lot more traditional with your straight-up fifth. So I kind of see this deception that John is sort of getting from the lyrics, and I see this within the music here. It's another artistic. The artistic conveyance is apt.
Yeah,
that's challenging to do when you're talking about such complicated themes. But if you can do that in music, great. If you can do that in pop music, greater.
John, do you know what movie it was from? Were you able to find that?
Well, specifically, because it was, in fact, written by Patrick Leonard originally for the film Fire with Fire. Madonna saw it, kind of stole it for her then husband Sean Penn's film At Close Range.
Oh, okay.
And it was straight up Leonard and Madonna working side by side for this piece. And in both cases, like, it was a dramatic film that it was being designed for. And the adaptation, though, not the film adaptation or anything like that, just the adaptation, I know it did transition from one piece to another as the two of them collaborated. So I'm kind of curious as to what it started out as.
Yeah, what it sounded
Because
like
where
before.
it went,
Yeah.
where it's at this point is very interesting.
And that drama that it has, I think, is really unique for the album too, because it's very, Papa Don't Preach was dramatic, but in a different way. It was dramatic in message, but not in presentation. Whereas this is dramatic in presentation.
Well, this loses a lot of the personal aspect that Papa Don't Preach had,
Right.
Which is important for what it was technically meant to do, but it's also important for the song itself because it allows it to expand into a different way. It's showing diversity in just. Once again, I'm going to be using this word a lot, in the content of this album, because instead of being so much of an idea of life stories and everything like that we'd already been seeing developed, this takes a completely different aspect, because Madonna, while still a character, you can get that from the chorus work and how she phrases it, she's also being a narrator in this same way, with a man can tell 1,000 lies, and I've learned my lesson well. Hope I live to tell the secret I have learned. Till then, it will burn inside of me.
Yeah.
She's
I was just about to read
saying
that. That's the,
it's third person, first person combination. She's talking about what she's thinking of right now. So it is a narrative, but it's also a narrative of herself. It's got dichotomy.
The lyrics, I mean, just to take them at face value, they come across as a little bit less cheesy as previous lyrics.
Yeah,
for sure. They're certainly not going for something that's in your face, on the nose. This is a lot more veiled.
Well, these seem very honest too, like honest to this kind of drama that it's trying to set up. Very
honest,
mystery.
but
There's a mystery
perhaps
about
veiled
them.
in poetry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also like where it's placed on the track because, as you were saying, and I was thinking about this too, the very deliberate production of the song and those really strong suspended beats.
Mm-hmm.
They're coming right in the middle of the album. So we've had like these, upbeat songs, and now we've, it's not just slowing you down a bit. It's quite slow.
Yeah, it brings
really
you
brings
almost
you
to a
like
halt,
a halt in an intermission kind great.
Well,
I think it's really well placed.
Within this track, actually, there's a part that serves almost as an intermission because
the
there's a part where
interlude.
everything just cuts. It cuts down to that core synth work, kind of close to what we had in the intro. I believe it breaks down to the same chord again, D minor 11th, and even so, that chord fades almost to nothing. That is incredibly odd for a pop album because.
And then the vocals go to a very different place.
Yeah.
Than the rest of the song.
Well, I also like when it comes back from the interlude, it's just the vocals first, and then the rest of the instrumentation follows.
I think it was the second
Like she's
chorus.
leading it back into the song work. Which,
It also, one thing we complain about is that it gets ruined because you do something great and then you ruin it by going too much one way or too much the other. Here she just, it's really going back and across the board. You were saying just the chordal changes alone are kind of odd and fairly unique for pop, but the transitions are great.
Well, she
don't
lets
feel
you.
divorce between the
that
two.
interlude lets you
They're
steep
odd.
in
No,
it.
they're actually odd on being on both sides of the table. On one sense, it's using chordal progressions that are probably a little complex for pop, but then it just retracts to that bare C major that's almost overtly simplistic.
Yeah.
But it's got that little twang in it because there's only a slight moment there where this chord actually kind of just adjusts, and then it does go into something a little bit later, but it's that we always go back to. We're either anchored in C major or we're anchored in D minor 11th. That's two bizarre places to consider yourself anchored for a song. Those would be a direction, not the home.
And-
Simultaneous homes.
But I like that she also feels comfortable, and the producer felt comfortable keeping her in that place without going those ways that you would typically expect, and that interlude staying intact and just letting you steep in that almost silence,
Yes.
and then bringing her voice back, and then bringing the instruments back for the end of the song.
It was
I think.
incredibly tasteful.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it made the bridge that much stronger when it came back.
I really like the production on that song.
Yeah. From track 4, we go to track 5, which is a little more
Where's
bubblegum.
the
180.
party?
So this is a very 80s song. Not that anything hadn't been before, but this is called "Where's the Party?" And it's like my only notes for this song is it's a party song. I mean, there's really not a lot to say about it beyond that on the core face value. Anyway, I mean there is
It's
more.
a light, fun song about where's the party.
Where's the party? Okay, this was pretty funny, and I told this off the air, but I'm going to tell it on the air. This is funny considering that I had just read an article about Madonna, how she's apparently a very noisy neighbor. She lives in the Upper West Side, and she lives in a co-op, and it's, I mean, obviously if you're a celebrity living in Manhattan, then you're going to have neighbors like anybody else,
Yeah.
even if you throw, really bizarre celebrity parties, presumably with your entire entourage. Well, she's doing this, and she has neighbors, and they're complaining, and she's getting sued. So, I had
should
just
play-
read that article before I listened to this song, and it's like, well, I guess not a lot has changed in 27 years.
Well, it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't. She's
No.
56. Good,
I mean,
good for her.
And also Madonna has always been very much at face value, like, this is who I am. I'm doing what I'm doing, and that's it.
And in her defense against the lawsuit, not all of it is parties. A lot of it is training for her shows. She still does shows,
Yeah.
and just
Yeah, she
dancing
just
in general. She's
released
got
a
to keep
live
herself
album
fit.
not that long ago. She did the MDNA tour, which she, I think was only a year or two ago.
The only argument
Anyway.
is don't do it in the co-op.
Anyway, this happy-go-lucky kind of song, it very much is right off of her first or second album. It's very much within vein of what she had already been doing. So it's not really outside the realm of what you would expect at this point in her career. Same time, the maturity she was showing in, well, everything else.
Especially the previous track.
Yeah, was not
it's-
here.
This is it's not here.
But
it's
also-
almost I want to say it's almost like it was a song cut from the previous
yes,
album
I would
that
say
ended
that.
up
That makes
here.
sense.
That's not a bad theory.
Yeah.
It kind of breaks up the maturity that I everybody was liking. Everybody here was enjoying.
At the
But
same-
that said,
the same token,
I think we have the
Pop
same
song.
idea.
it's a really good pop.
It's a good pop song, but
Not
also
just that,
it
yeah.
breaks up the mood. Like we got fairly dark and pretty serious in the last song, especially upon further analysis. And this kind of pulls you back out and goes, "Hey, wait, let's have a
Lighten
good
up.
time. Yeah, lighten up." To bring the album back around to another swing, and also to add a little more variety, because this is the other songs had a very very much a pop structure, but this is the first one we got that's just flat out candy, empty calorie pop music.
let's just take the final chorus from the previous track here.
from live Live to Tell.
Yes. If I ran away, I'd never have the strength to go very far. How would they hear the beating of my heart? Will it grow cold? The secret that I hide, will I grow old? How will they hear? When will they learn? How will they know? This is dark stuff. She's in bed on the verge of doing
Where's
something
the-
rash.
Wait.
That's why you need the
I wanna
party.
do-
That's why
I wanna
you
do- I wanna
need the
do
party.
part two.
Okay, so read
Part
this,
two.
the opening to the next track.
Working Monday through Friday takes up all my time. If I can get to the weekend, everything will work out just
see, that's-
fine. That's when I go crazy. That's when I can have fun. Time to be with my baby. Time to come undone.
That's part of the sort of the symbolism of working. She's working with, of course, she's working off of comparing people who actually do have 9-to-5 jobs, because obviously Madonna probably doesn't, probably
Well,
never
she
has.
could be in the
It's
studio,
either there's
Yeah.
well probably
True.
a hell of a lot more than that. There's
a lot of detail.
I assume this. Okay, big thing. This album was recorded in about 5 months. The entire thing, front to back, was recorded in 5 months.
But that's not uncommon for the
But
time.
that sort of idea, exactly. You're spending 20 hours a day. You're sleeping in a recording studio,
Yeah.
and then you're for like 3-4 months. You're not doing anything, or maybe you're going straight into a 6-month.
Okay, so in that case, maybe it's not metaphorical.
Yeah.
Maybe it
Yeah,
really
no.
is about her and her work.
It's probably not a Monday through Friday sort of gig, but
But
I'm
it's
sure she's
relatable
putting a
for the
hell of a lot of
audiences.
Yes,
hours.
it is.
Yeah.
if
I
we
feel
can
like
see
that
it
was-
through that.
Popular, relatable songs. I think earlier you guys were mentioning Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And then I was also thinking of Manic Monday, which is,
Yeah.
the Bangles song that Prince wrote. So it's about, like, just getting through the week and having fun.
And tons of bands have written
Yeah.
songs about partying like that.
So
and
this is like a good,
I don't mind its placement on the record too, because there was a lot of levity in Live to Tell, and it's like
That's another one
we
of
need
those-
a break.
It's another one of
have
those
a break.
define the 80s things, though.
Yeah.
I mean, we work hard, we play hard.
Well, that's true
again,
too, which
the 80s,
was
you know?
common. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, musically, I think
Jobs were
it
abundant.
was your typical pop structure. I mean, was there any musicality that stood out to you, or was it very much just synth heavy?
Simple structure, I think.
Yeah, it was very basic. It was
Yeah.
really very basic. I mean, actually, you were the one who brought up "Girls Just Want to Have Fun," and it actually made me a little bit nostalgic for that song, only because I feel like that kind of pulled it off a little bit better. So if you're going to talk about the actual structure of this song, there's not much to go off of, but at least I will defend its role as placement on this album.
No, I agree.
I think it was a perfect release, and I think artistically this was very intentional to follow the previous song. This is the you need to release at some point. You need to, exactly what this says. Where's the party? I want to free my soul. I want to lose control. I want to free my soul. I want to lose control. That's it. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, it's simple, and I don't think it's trying to be anything that it's not.
No.
It's
It's
really
very face
about,
value.
Yeah,
And I think
a good time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's a song also that is kind of, it's not. Madonna's really not known for these kind of songs. She's known for songs more like "Open Your Heart" or "Papa Don't Preach" or "Live to Tell." So
Now.
So let the girl have some fun.
well, yeah, and it's
I
interesting.
think what he was saying, like her, it has the sound of the previous albums,
Yeah.
Into the
Yeah.
Groove and like Come
Yeah.
Dance. She was a dance
Yeah.
singer, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She started out as singing dance music, and then
and then move from there.
yeah, and it's all of her stuff. I think has the residue of that poppy, get everybody on
And
their
she
feet
still does
stuff.
party. I mean, even when she did music back in the early 2000s, that was a pop song based and a dance song based on the trends of the time, more techno, more ingrained in bass work, and so she still follows that trend. And I think the song is very iconic of the 80s, of the mid 80s.
That's why there's no point in us criticizing this song, because she's getting sued for it. I
I think that's a good jumping off point to go to the title track of the record, True Blue, which it's funny because when I first heard this track, I couldn't figure out. It clearly sounded to me like it was of another time, but it was still very pop and very 80s, so I couldn't place it. But Steve pointed out that it was a very 50s style song.
Very doo-wop.
And Steve actually, while we were listening, started singing doo-wop over it, and it really did like just saying doo-wop, and it really fit
It's
really
all
well.
you need, and in many ways it's there without actually saying doo-wop.
Yeah.
The progression in the bass is there in the bass in this track. So, it's taken almost verbatim.
And
but
the
obviously
chorus coming in at key times.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
that really feels that
those
gives you
little
the doo-wop
harmonies.
feel, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it's still an 80s-ified thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And take that however you will, because of course it's the little textural variances that only the 80s seems to have immersed themselves in and embraced as the tools of the time. That's what they used to borrow this 50s style. They use the drum box, they use all that synth work, and then even the filter through which those female vocals come in to do those harmonies seems like it's got the same level of echo and reverb like they would have used in the 1980s. So of course, yes, it's from the 1980s. Why wouldn't it be an 80s 50s track? But, it's an homage to a time that
definitely.
Well,
30 years.
It also kind of was a little bit too simplistic. That's the one issue I really got with it, because it was like a pretty standard 4-chord progression. If I'm
But
not
that's
mistaken.
the
Yeah.
nature of doo-wop. If you think about the
Yeah.
songs then, they weren't complicated.
but there was
they were
I
hints.
don't
There
know
was
of
little
anything
accents
for
with
very
things like the
doo-wop.
violin, the little violin accents, which I actually kind of honed in on because they were great little bits of texture. You can take that doo-wop framework. It wasn't just quite 80s-ified, popified. It was kind of simplified too.
But I think that was intentional.
But there was complexity in the previous songs that still remained pop that I think could have been addressed here.
But
That
that's
could
the
have been
thing.
added here.
You can't even say popified, because then you'd just say popifying pop, because it was pop in the
Well,
50s,
no.
it's still pop in the 80s.
No, but I'm saying it feels like it was just it was a little bit too simplistic. She had shown, and the producers had shown, that they knew how to really get complicated.
I'll give you
I
this.
think there's just a little bit of a disparity.
It was interesting that she decided to go so innocent at this particular time in the album. I mean, it obviously not just rang from doo-wop, but it rang like the kind of thing you would hear on a 1950s high school dance floor. How tame could that get by Madonna standards when you think about it? But usually, when she does something like that, it's veiled in a little bit of irony.
Yeah.
Usually, although I haven't found it yet.
Yeah, well, I don't know that there's anything really that ironic about this track. And Madonna was still more innocent in the earlier albums than the later. She starts to come out of her shell at this point, but she doesn't get really more hardcore or sexualized or all, proactive and message driven. She's more message driven in moments in the earlier albums. It becomes more apparent and more obvious later on. So I think that this song, I don't think there's any irony. I think that its simplicity is intentional. for better or for worse, it's just designed to be an 80s-ified doo-wop song with very simple, cute lyrics. I don't think it was supposed to. And beyond that, it becomes personal preference. And I would agree that it's one of the less interesting songs on the record. It's not by far as engaging. Like, 'cause even "Where's the Party" there was no veil to it. It was just what it was, and that was it. This, she's trying a different style. She's, the lyrics a little simpler, a little cleaner. The melody's cleaner and simpler. I don't think that there was supposed to be many layers to it, and it made it fall behind a little bit as far as the record goes.
Was this the track that was an ode to Sean Penn?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, it very much was.
Then there's really nothing else to read into it.
Yeah.
Nothing else at all.
True blue, baby, I love you.
Yep. And I think that at that point, we often, talking on the podcast, find conflict in judging songs that are so hyper-personal, because ultimately, whether we like it or hate it, it's designed for a reason, and it's hyper-personal. If this was dedicated and designed for Sean Penn, then that's what the song's purpose is, and that's it,
There's two schools of thought of looking at it. You can write a song like this and then release it to the world, and it's just like, well, that was for that person. What are you doing releasing it to the world?
Right.
Or maybe that's the most romantic thing you can do, is share it with the world. So,
Making the personal universal.
Exactly. So, whatever's your pleasure.
Going from track 6 to track 7, we get to my favorite track, and as I understand, John's favorite track as well. La Isla Bonita, which is also a single off the record. This song for me was just one of those. Madonna's really good at setting up a setting, but in this song especially, it's just so clear from the opening to the track that it's got this tropical getaway fantasy vibe. You're in this location that she's now going to begin to sing about, and you get steeped in it through the rest of the track. It's so obvious from the minute it starts. It's
also probably the point in her career where she goes from being just sort of a pop, cute idol to really becoming like the sex figure she became later on.
This is hinting at it for sure.
This is the point where she starts infusing the real Latin ideas,
which she uses in other tracks,
the Central
too.
and South America ideas of music, and popifying it and bringing it into her fold.
We've said the word popifying way too much.
You can't say Madonna without that word. But here's where, this is the first song in her career, if I'm not mistaken, that she really addresses that. Because I don't remember anything off of the first two albums, just reading over the text, that had any sort of salsa or mambo ideas really put into it.
This was the first record that had any of that.
Yet going forward, she does it a lot more, and it doesn't become her main focus, but this is sort of like the birth of one of the major aspects of her music.
But see, this is where I have a little bit of an argument, because I saw this as more of an experiment than anything else.
That's my point. That's my point.
Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with experimentation. Very often we're intrigued as we go through albums. It's like, that was a healthy refresher from everything we've had, because otherwise you can sort of start to get immersed in the same exact stuff, even if it's just the minor things that changes it. In this particular case, it's the bongos. You have bongos. Okay, I didn't hear bongos before. It's normally drum box. Now I have bongos replacing the drum box. That's a tiny thing, but it's not worth ignoring.
Also, the Spanish...
That's the other big thing, and actually that was my favorite part about this track. It's not quite enough for me to consider it my favorite track on the record like you guys, only because I think that actually this album was immersed in a particular realm that I think it had excelled at, specifically in the two tracks we've mentioned, which were the first track and
Papa Don't Preach,
and Live to Tell. Those are the two tracks that I think really highlight that style, and I think in general, if you do have a style, you might as well go balls to the wall with that style, rather than offering little doses of the alternative. It doesn't by any stretch make it the worst, but it makes it an experiment, which is it's interesting, it's novel, it's certainly novel for Madonna, and I accept that, but it's not like, I've heard this style before. We can't really pin it down. We know that it's at least Cuban. It could be salsa. It's mambo.
Well,
I don't know enough about Latin music.
That was the last song, not this song.
Oh, but this still had something in there.
It had Latin, but it wasn't
influence.
Yeah, but it wasn't a dance song by any means. This was more slow.
I think it could still be danced too. I would put it.
Slower.
It was more. This was more ballad. The final track was a dancey Spanish song.
I would put it as the second most danceable track on this record, I think.
No. I disagree. That's the final track.
Yeah,
that was the final
argue
track.
This one.
Yeah, this was a ballad.
Open Your Heart's very danceable.
Yeah, This was more in line
Maybe
with
they're
with
all
the towel.
danceable then maybe.
True.
When you think about it.
But
yeah,
ulti-
one word, Madonna.
Exactly.
For me, it was mostly the
Kind of
tropical
dancing.
setting, the enticing lyrics, and then the Spanish guitar. Even though the moments it came in were very fleeting, it was out throughout the song. I wanted more from the solo that was featured towards the middle part towards the end. I wanted more from that
That's
solo.
the thing. That solo was 4 measures.
Yeah.
And it was. I mean, it broke my heart to only do 4 measures of a
guitar.
sweeping Spanish guitar.
But there was a lot of it throughout the track, and I did like that it did keep coming back, and it
It was
there.
peppered, just
Yeah.
like the bongos. It was peppered. So I think this is more of an eyebrow raiser for me. I was intrigued by this track.
I enjoyed being steeped in the setting, and the setting was so strong, so that's where I connected, really.
Yeah. It's like if we had previously had an intermission, then this is like an aside. It's just
Yes.
like a little soliloquy.
I think the song, like, to create a mood, I think if that's what its intention was, it definitely did that.
Yeah.
It took you to a different place.
And that's what she's pretty much singing
hinted
about,
at,
is
yeah.
dreaming about this different place that she wants to go to, and it conveys that emotionally.
Yeah,
it
it
makes
does.
it gives you a want to be somewhere else, to a more beautiful, tropical
Bonita.
places. Yeah,
It
exactly.
became, for me,
Beautiful.
like,
In your case, though, why do you want to be out of this album? It seems, though, because you know her style is really what we've
But
been
why
having. at
can't
this
she
point.
experiment? Why can't she play? I mean, if you think about it, after Where's the Party, everything is about kind of trying this different, like True Blue is about this 50s thing, and then we're seeing Life's La Bonita, and then, it's like she's trying different styles.
It's true. It just seems to me that as she tries these different styles, it seems to take away from her core a little bit. It takes away from the center of the album, which is always where she generally excels. So it means that it comes off that these are always going to be a little bit second rate. They're still great songs, they're still great
I would-
experiments, but they're second rate to her work.
I would
disagree.
argue.
This was a
I
hit.
would
can't
argue.
remember,
It
but
was a
Life's La
hit.
Bonita
This
was a big
Absolutely
this actually
was.
hit number 4 on the billboards.
Yeah.
Just
There's
my
also
perspective.
well, no, you're not the only one that has disliked this song over the years, or even had issue with this song over the years. Everybody, I mean, this is one of those albums that's just been nitpicked over the past almost
Sure,
30
it's been around, and
years.
it was like this was
It's
the
why it's-
album that changed her trajectory too.
Right, she
But this podcast is going to change it around, right?
But as far as context goes, as far as a divergent idea from what the core was, I would even argue that the lyrics and what she's singing about in the previous songs are just as different from what the core quote idea was as what these later songs are doing on a musical aspect.
And it's
This
still
is
a
all
very
about
personal.
This is all about experimentation.
Well, I'll
here.
give you this. This is a dreamier track than the previous, for
Oh, yes.
sure.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
because she's singing about an island in her dream,
she's in a
essentially.
different place on this track.
Yeah.
It's an idealized paradise.
And that makes it more personal because it's her dream. It's in her head,
Yeah.
which I think makes it hyper personal.
Yeah, I only compare this track and the previous as being both different in style from her core work. But as far as theme work is concerned, this track is miles above, because
Yeah.
it's hard to really talk about the previous track without just saying it's a love song.
Yeah.
This has got more,
Depth.
Yeah.
Now we go to a song that I feel personally, at least, didn't have very much depth at all. Jimmy, Jimmy. My
The
problem-
song about no, it's an ode to James Dean.
Okay,
All right,
I can see
well,
that.
Just know about that part. The problem is Jimmy was it is a lot of the problems of the 80s, and that's the repetition.
It's
It's
just
so fast. I just wish it was a little bit
Slower.
slower. There was something so speedy about it, and I couldn't quite figure out why.
You know-
unless it was like trying to emulate a particular style, which I couldn't quite nail, except the fact that it's just super speedy.
I don't know if I'm nailing it here, but I will definitely say that I don't really compare most of Madonna's work with electronica. I would just say that there's electronic influence in it because that was
was
common.
happening in the 80s.
Exactly. This one though kind of goes much further. With
Yeah,
it.
it does.
Much further, much more glitter. If you see it as glitter, clutter could be another word for it.
yeah. I mean, it's just the repetition of Jimmy, Jimmy in the verses. Like, it almost sounded like a cheerleader song, almost, you know. And there were songs done in that kind of rah rah style then in the '80s too. It just felt most out of place than anything else. And there's a
It's
narrative
so
here.
happy-go-lucky. I think that's my problem with it.
Well, and what's interesting about it, though, is this is the first song, though, that's not first person. Like, she's singing... The focus is on someone else. It's being sung about somebody else. It's about James Dean.
Well, okay, here's a direct quote from her about this song. I used to fantasize that we grew up in the same neighborhood and that he, quote, James Dean, moved away and became a big star. This was a complete ode to him.
Yeah.
So the cheerleader aspect, yeah, that was kind of
intentional.
She really was a cheerleader for it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that conceptually it's not, it doesn't work. I just don't think I liked it as much. I think is what I'm getting down to. It's a personal taste thing. I felt like it was very repetitive and it disengaged me a bit. Whereas even the other popular tracks, like Where's the Party, was just fun, so I kind of got sucked in. This one was not so much.
There's a definite irony here, though. Now that we know that fact, and I mean, obviously, James Dean went and crashed up his car and died in 1952.
Oh, you're gonna quote the lyrics?
I mean, it's just, it's a cheerleading track that has to include that. Why did you go and crash up your car, Jimmy, Jimmy, oh, Jimmy, Jimmy? Is it because it didn't take you too far, Jimmy, Jimmy? But then when you consider the tone of this, you could take those words to the bank, but it's so lighthearted about it that it comes off as a little unsettling, really.
Yeah.
Could be.
Cheerleading the dead guy?
I mean, it could be. I mean, also, though, it also could bring to light the hyper fantasization that we put pop stars on. I mean, people were, fantasize about musicians and about artists and actors constantly, from posters and all this other stuff and these idolizations. And so it could be an intentional over-idolization of this guy, even talking about the horrible thing that happened to him.
No, that's what I'm thinking.
Intentionally, young. She sounds like super young, super teenagey cheerleader.
Yeah,
like
she
you're
really.
saying.
She
Like
goes back to that.
Jimmy,
She goes back to that nasal.
Yeah.
But I think in this song, if you put together what you've just shared about, James Dean.
Oh yeah,
and
and this was something that was out.
Being somebody that's like, why'd you have to go do that?
Yeah.
I'm so young, and why'd you have to go?
Interestingly enough, no, yeah, you're right, but interestingly enough, I want to almost go back to what Matt said, because I'm starting to believe it when you consider the following line, which is, why do you always have, Jimmy, why do you always have such a sad face? That makes me think of the common poster that is out of him.
He always
the
looks
poster
so
that everyone
serious,
knows, such a
leaning
serious
on the
personality,
motorcycle,
right? Being the bad boy of the time and whatnot. But it's just so strange how she just came straight out of the death reference back into the figurehead.
Yeah.
The figurehead that everybody knew. And that's an odd break. And that I can't help but see as some kind of, as you said, like...
Intent.
An intent of sort of wrapping up this fixation with celebrityhood and putting it in a very overt... very in-your-face, almost unsettling song.
Which I wouldn't knock at all. I think me personally, my dislike with the song is personally just musically. Like the repetition and the speed.
Not a huge fan of presentation.
But the theme work does make sense, and I actually kind of think that's actually a smart way of
it is.
showing this, because it still happens now, and there's still songs like that now too. So, and I don't know that there were a lot.
It's kind of ridiculous in many ways. I mean, it's so relatable. Even though this was in the '80s, it's still relatable today because people talk about James Dean in the same way.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, people were obsessed with him, obviously, when he was alive. It almost kind of bellowed more after he died, and it continues every generation.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
I have seen. Always, someone I know has that poster.
Absolutely.
Someone.
I would agree.
Yeah. Or Wayne.
Or
John Wayne.
Yeah.
I mean, he is an icon.
When you think about it, it is very odd to have a sex symbol that continues years decades after death. On that morose segue.
I'm trying to find a transition.
That love makes the world go round.
Yeah. So track 9, as Rashmi is segueing us to, is called "Love Makes the World Go Round." It's the final track on the record, the closer. And initially, I was a little disappointed that it was just kind of a happy, fun, kind of overwhelmingly positive dance song. But considering the way the album starts in this very serious and intense place, wrapping it up with something more lighthearted, but still an important message, obviously, I think actually makes a lot of sense.
It even helps that the songs have been kind of alternating theme-wise between darker motifs and lightheartedness and dark and back and forth, back and forth. I would not have liked a sad ending to an album. Just for the framework of what's being built here, I want to be left on a happy note. Because even... And that's everything here. Even the saddest parts, the deeper, darker parts, are still more towards the upbeat than the downbeat. In general, but I wanted just being happy. I mean, that's the persona of everything that was going on here. There's still a sliver of happiness in every little song.
Yeah, I really like actually what she's playing with another influence. I mean, to me, again, I hear a lot of Latin influence, and we were talking about this earlier, like maybe even specifically Cuban. There's a lot of the rhythms are very. It's really up, and it's
You heard in the vein of Gloria Estefan, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's funny is the song that Rashmi compared it to by Gloria Estefan came out much later after this song. So they're both drawing from a similar influence, clearly. But it's kind of funny to me to picture Gloria Estefan, who's known for that kind of music, if she was influenced by Madonna, is just
I
silly.
highly doubt it.
No, I doubt it too,
And
but it's just
actually,
a funny image.
Considering that and considering a few other things, I was thinking, I know when to call bull, and even on my own words here. Going back to the James Dean song really quick,
Yeah.
I don't think it was that deep.
Yeah.
I just don't think
No,
there was
no,
that
no.
much irony here. I think it really was an ode in the same way that many of these other tracks are odes.
Yeah.
When you really think about it, it's either an ode to love in general. In this case, it's an ode to love making the world go round, and it's exactly that broad. It does so in, again, a slightly different style, and that style is of one that's very danceable.
Yeah. It's a very dancey song. I'd say one of the most dancey songs on the record. Although Steve did point out that instrumentation-wise, the bass might as well have been played by a robot. And it was. It was mostly from it was a machine. It wasn't actually a bass.
Yeah, in this sense, I don't mean that negatively, because
Yeah.
you wouldn't even bat an eye on this album for a bass sounding robotic. You don't really expect a full band. You expect a lot of synth work to accompany. That includes the synth bass and the drum box and all that. And the bass was rather... I mean, I was intrigued by it so much to the point that I kind of want to transcribe it.
Right.
It was... I don't know. It was driving, to be honest. Maybe that's the interesting thing. It kind of... It's not something I would expect to coincide with that Latin rhythm. I would not expect that style bass with that.
And yet it worked really well.
Yeah. Normally you wouldn't find anything robotic in Latin music. You'd find just sort of the core raw sounds of Latin acoustic. But whatever, the fusion worked.
No, it did. It worked really well, and I like the wrap up of this song personally. I think
It was also just the one issue is that it's kind of just a rehash of your standard "make love not war" type of a
sure.
That's a lyric in the song.
Yeah, in fact.
Yeah, and it's a peace, love, and happiness. I mean, it's the 1960s revolution. She's just saying we should keep doing it. So message like words wide, message wide is really nothing spectacular there. But this is a lot of times we'll say it's like an end credits type of a deal. You want to be left on a happy note.
Yeah.
And this
If you
does
go to
leave
see a
you
show,
feeling
a
good.
play, you want a nice big final number that may not be the best part of the play, but still is the sort of thing that leaves a step in your
spring in your
step.
step.
Excuse me, spring in your step, and has you walking away with a smile on your face.
Yeah, I think it's a very simple, the lineup on the CD, having it be the last one, Love Makes the World Go Round. It's like, that's what it is. It's just a really upbeat pop song with a good message that they decided to, that's where it is. So
And one final thing, I think this song does have her best vocal range. I just wanted to point out, this is like the part where really it did feel like she was giving it her best, or really wanted to just impact something with this song, because I feel like she went to 11 on this one.
That's an interesting observation. It's not something I personally noticed, because after a certain point, after like the second track, I kind of noticed the status quo.
Yeah.
But if you saw it here, then that's a perk.
I just a little bit more, just a little bit more.
But I'm looking. I can't believe it says "Make Love Not War." I did not notice that.
Yeah, oh,
last
yeah,
time
absolutely.
around.
Love, what they
Yep.
say. It's
Yep.
easy to recite.
But
it don't mean
she
damn
mentions that
unless
it's
we're
a
gonna
cliche
fight.
message that's been said time and
But I
time
don't
again.
think she's trying to, nobody's trying to be deep here. It's
Yeah.
just a good message song. It's the last track. It's pretty spelled out exactly what it's supposed to do.
It's a good message accompanying a very danceable rhythm. And again, I find that very funny, considering that. Well, is that how we're going to fight off?
Yeah, why
We're gonna
not? If
dance
you're
it away?
dancing, it's hard to fight. Think about it.
It's true.
Well, it's the
Michael
whole-
Jackson
that's
managed
true.
to do
We
it,
can
though.
get-
He
so we
danced
Get
and fought.
everybody to dance at once, then no one will fight each
He
other.
fought dance. There's a difference.
He fought dance.
Yes,
That's
he
fought
true.
dance.
Unless it's
He
a
did.
mosh pit.
And there were zombies and
Not in that
and
one.
other
The fight
criminals.
dancing was in Beat It, but they're
No,
the
there's a
same
whole
universe.
No, there's a whole variety. Yes,
No,
they
Footloose.
are.
Footloose
Yes, they
was
are.
it.
Well, no.
The end
what-
of Footloose, there's that giant in the warehouse when
Yeah.
everybody the fight dancing and they're leaving on the way out.
Which eventually became a very popular style on Broadway, but that's besides the point.
I've actually always thought that political meetings should start with the dance party.
That
I think you
actually-
feel very different when
They
you
would
finish
loosen up.
dancing.
Oh no, dance off UN.
Dance off UN.
They would loosen
I
up
would-
and then say,
come
"Yeah,
on.
you can have that island. Take it. Why not?"
Oh, who
Putin,
cares?
Yeah.
Putin versus Obama. Come on.
My
That
money
would
would be on
be
Obama.
awesome.
Who likes to take his shirt off? You might actually win that one.
That's true.
True. To turn a battle of wits into a battle of moves.
It might get more done at the UN though.
True.
Yeah, politicals. Anyway, back to the music.
I guess we're at a good point to wrap up the record now. Who wants to go first then?
I wanna go first.
You do? Okay, go for
Okay.
it. Rashmi, you'll get to give it its rating last. We let the guest go last, so.
Okay, one retro album. Okay, we have that out of the way. We're not even going to talk about it anymore. Madonna does not, and even looking within the framework of pop at the time and what's going on at the time, she doesn't do anything new per se. She doesn't revolutionize anything. What she does is she does take a lot of different aspects of what everybody else was doing and puts them together in a very solid format. She does push boundaries, but she doesn't set any trends with this album. That does come later for her. And in retrospect, here's where the stardom is first achieved for Madonna, but she doesn't become the powerful icon until later in her career. But here really is a major turning point for her because there's new ideas, new concepts. She grows up in this album.
There's depth.
From childhood of Material Girl to, with the exception of like Where's the Party, just really trying to get better ideas across. It's like I said, it's not revolutionary, but this is all the some of the purest forms of pop ever diluted into really just addictive music. You can't get away from a lot of the stuff. That's why like 5 or 6 of these 9 songs are on radios constantly, because they are still, the line of here's your 1980s pop. This is an album that I would put her with Michael Jackson, with Prince as 80s royalty. This is that point. It's still just pop though. That's what it boils down to. There's nothing but pop here. So yeah, it's a great album, but it doesn't progress anything. So it's that solid culminating 4. It's a 4 through and through. It does nothing magical, but it is pretty special.
Well, I mean, I do believe one thing. There's something about this this being the turning point of her career that you mentioned. She doesn't achieve it until later in life. I don't believe that's true. I believe this was the big album that projected her
That
to
made
that
her,
star.
I would say, makes her a star, but this isn't the one that I believe is her like iconic power.
When was Like a Virgin?
That was the previous.
That was the previous. So
As
that's interesting
well
because
as-
I feel like that's a little bit more impactful in terms of what we know as Madonna and what has survived as Madonna. Not that I know that much about that album, but that's the one that seems to get more circulated in hearsay than True Blue. Still, that was interesting because then I kind of went into this album blind. And I took it much the same way. For instance, I see it as the peak of 80s pop in a sense, in a certain style, because you can't make these direct comparisons between her and Prince or her and Michael Jackson, because they were still producing wildly different avenues for pop at the time. And I gotta say, there's one thing about Michael Jackson's work, is that sometimes he went for pure punch value, and
Yeah.
the danceability it bleeds through in every single track. That's one thing that I felt that this album suffered a little bit by comparison, is just because there are danceable songs, but when you think about it, there are only a few of them. The rest of them are more leave on the radio while you do your work kind of tracks. Still strong for pop music of its time, but, if you're gonna do pop, if you're gonna do shameless pop, why not go for the gold, the way I figure it? To me, not all of this is gold. There's interesting stuff here, but the interesting stuff that I find is actually the stuff in this album that departs from pop. And that's what you find out of the first track and also the fourth track. That's the stuff that I want to hear more of out of this album. The tail end is a little bit of a letdown for me. It does kind of revert to become a much more positive sounding album, which is not a bad thing. It would seem like a good thing, but to me, it's pulling away from what she was building here, the potential that was there. So for me, this album is a little bit of a letdown at the end. For that, I can't really go 4 territory. It's definitely 3 territory, because as far as pop is concerned, for the 80s, this is top tier, but it's not the top most tier. I'm going to put it as a 3.25.
Wow, significantly lower. So, for me, wrapping up, I mean, you both said a lot that there is to say. I mean, the album, most of it is very face value as far as she's got. Some songs have strong messages, some have broader messages, some of them have no message. You know, well, but then again, I guess even wanting to party is a message. But for me, I mean, listening to this album, I forgot how many hits I heard came from this record that I personally really loved. And I'm more in line with John. I just feel like this is an album where Madonna is making and breaking rules. She's not revolutionizing the 80s, but she's definitely taking steps towards defining herself as an artist, and it happened on this record. Papa Don't Preach, you know, is very much a huge part of her. So is La Isla Bonita, that kind of sexier, sultry side of her. Like, all of that is coming out on this record. Whereas why I feel like a Virgin, she's singing about a sexual topic, but in a more immature way. Like a Virgin is, I feel like it's not being sultry or sexy. It's just it's being more matter of fact.
I'd argue that was punchier. That's the only thing.
Okay. But I think message-wise, I think she's growing into the woman that she will become, and the album reflects that. And that's why it's a little schizophrenic, because puberty and beyond, and becoming who you are as an adult, whether you reach it when you're 20, 25, 30, whenever you get to that point in your life where you realize this is my adult self, my version of me, it's not always easy and clear.
It's a schizophrenic time.
Yeah, it's conflicting. And this album, I think, really defines that for her in her career and in her time of her life. And so that's why I'm more in line with John. I think it's a 4. I don't think it's less than a 4. I think it's the next tier of pop, but it's by no means a 5. It's not a Prince or Michael Jackson. Thriller to me, I still personally rate as the pinnacle of pop music, especially for the time. And I'll defend that in another podcast. But this is definitely approaching that territory. This is where you see, this is her skyrocketing point, and she builds and blows the doors off from here, with tons of work. So that's why it sticks at a solid 4 for me, too.
Well, I'm not just rating it against pop music, of course. I'm rating it against all music that's out
and I'm
there.
doing the same thing.
Yeah, so, well, the final word.
I really love what you guys have to say. I feel like I've learned a lot. I listened to this music, and it's just something I just enjoyed it, and it was just good pop music. And, again, I think we talked a little bit about just video culture really took off during this time. Madonna and the Papa Don't Preach and Open Your Heart. It was very dancey, and she is a great dancer and has always had that be a part of it. So I'm wondering how much of that actually feeds into some of the response that I have, because I'm thinking of the videos when I'm listening to the songs, like La Isla Bonita has she's in a beautiful dress, and everybody's they're all dancing, and it's I think it's just it's just a really good pop album in that there aren't like super high expectations of, depth or anything new or novel being introduced musically per se. I think it's definitely a production baby. I think this album is taking, like you were saying, John, just a lot of different influences and really packaging it in a way that made it incredibly popular and accessible. Nothing is too much of anything in particular, and giving it a wide appeal, which is what it was. And we even, she self-admittedly says, she's not the strongest singer, and but the fact that this album really took off, I think it's just packaged really well. It's produced really well, and it's very much of its time. And to me, it's just a really great pop album, exactly like popularly playing music that appealed to a lot of people. It's what popular is, and for that reason, I think it would, in my books, it is a 4. I don't think it's easy to write a really good, put out a really good popular album. That in itself is its own thing. So
Fair enough.
Excellent. So now we'll take a small break, and so the next song that Rashmi is going to play for you guys is called Here Again, also featured from the new record Puzzle. So we'll take you to that.
How do I forget where you make me feel? Time passes and I believe none of it was real. Time has a way playing little games. She passes and I believe everything has changed.
That was great. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for playing. We're going to close out the show, of course, with one more song, like we've been doing. But it's been really a pleasure to have you. I've gotten to know you pretty well today and over just talking through with you online, and I'm excited to see you perform more. I'm excited for the new record. But so you say you're from Texas,
Right.
That's where you were born.
Yes, was born in Dallas.
Is country a huge influence on your music?
I do a lot of finger picking, so I do think that it is. And I used to front a country band,
Oh, really?
and there was like a contest locally, and we placed, and it was a fun time. You were just doing what everybody else around you is doing.
Sure, I'd imagine.
And so, yeah, definitely. And I also think country music has some really great singers, so it was always good to listen to. It's one of those genres of music where the singing is actually still very important. Reba McEntire can really sing.
Oh, yeah.
Natalie Maines can really sing. So it's not so much a a production operation. So yeah, they're definitely that's definitely an influence. And
Were you a singer from a young age and a guitar player from a young age?
no, I picked up the guitar much later in life. I was always singing, and I was in choir, and doing that, and I was in my high school glee club. I came to the guitar later, more out of like wanting to sing independently and not having to depend on someone. So between teaching myself and taking classes whenever I could, I started to play and compose on the guitar.
That's
songs.
why everyone goes to the guitar. They want that
Yeah.
independence.
Right.
Well, it also helps when writing your songs, and you write all your own original work.
Yes, I do. I've written all the songs.
And this is something that we don't always breach, but where do you get your ideas from? That's one thing I just always like asking people. Like, do you have a specific story for any of your songs?
I would just interrupt only because you said country music before. I was going to say that's another, apart from just having really good singers, they also have really, really good ballads. I think that's the whole thing that drives country music a lot is people's experiences in their own
Right.
town, people
The
they
point of
actually
view.
knew. It's very on the nose. It's very, it's not going toward, like, it doesn't need to go toward the poetic end. It just goes toward that. So I was wondering if maybe, if that's an inclusion in the answer by any chance.
Yeah, because you're writing all the words. Where do they come from?
Sometimes I'll think of a lyric and I'll just write it down, and sometimes I'll be playing like a series of chords, and the lyrics just start to come through. And I can't say that it's always the same. I have a song called "Maintenance Minder" that I was a friend was out of town, and I was just moving her car for her, like just street cleaning, and her dashboard was always lit up, and the maintenance minder was lit up, and it was just like something that stuck in my head. And I ended up writing this song about that, but it was more of a metaphor for the narrative being that flashing on and off. I see it every time the key turns in the car, and hoping that it's going to make it, and it's really about me or the person, whoever's singing it, hoping that the car is going to make it, because there's all these warnings, but I still have to keep going. So it turns into this other thing when I'm writing it. So
I really like that metaphor. No, I like that. That's a nice one.
Yeah, no, that's one that I had never even considered, but because considering I did have a check engine light that was on constantly, never a thing that I would have considered writing a song for, but that's actually rather insightful.
Well, you should probably gotten your car checked out.
Well, now it's just sitting in the middle of my driveway unused, so
There you go.
it's one way to do
What
it.
brought you to New York specifically?
I was doing a lot of theater at that time.
Okay.
And I came here to do that, and I was playing my music. At that time I was like in a little of a cover band, and then I started to write my own stuff. So I started writing later, and then I wasn't writing as a teenager and stuff. I always thought, wow, those people who write their own songs, that's really cool. And
It's the same way.
and so then I was doing a lot of theater, and then I moved to LA for a few years, and that's when I really started writing music. And part of that was, it was just a very isolated culture, and I think I just had the time to do it. And then I didn't really like living there, so I moved back. And now it's like a mix of the music and getting out for TV and film, and I don't do as much theater anymore simply because of the time commitment, but it's
Right.
definitely something. If a play that really resonated with me came along, I would definitely,
But you do acting and voice acting as well.
Yes, I do.
Cool.
You think this traveling was directly related? Like you needed to be sort of away from home or step away from home for a while to kind of let the ideas flow?
You mean like moving away from
Well,
Texas?
for instance, like when you spent the time in LA.
Yes, no, I definitely think there's something to being displaced that really objectifies your experience and creates, growth, and you really start to question everything. And in my case, I went from a New York very artistic theater, going from play to play to play, to very isolating kind of car culture, driving to an audition, and you could literally go the whole day without talking to another human being. And I felt like, all of a sudden there was this huge difference between life in New York, where, there's a sea of humanity always. And I think I just became aware of things in a way. There was a lot of growth, and from that, there was just a lot of writing. And so, yeah, I would say that it kind of grew me up.
I think that displacement, it actually goes back to like the old joke about composers and how they have to have their shack in the middle of the woods because that is the level of displacement that they require in order to just sink into inspiration. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and not many of us get to have a shack, but at least we can move. So,
And so did you actively pursue an acoustic kind of folk rock kind of sound, or did you kind of just come to that naturally? Is it just naturally a progression from the country influence?
I think it is. I mean, I wasn't conscious of it as being, I'm influenced by country, and so, but I was very drawn to like this acoustic sound.
Yeah.
And you can play a set of chords on an acoustic guitar for any genre of music,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, definitely, and then in LA I actually met this blues player, and that's where I kind of got the finger picking, and he was really great. So just really hearing different sounds and different things, and there's something about the guitar that can really simplify. I mean, I guess it's true for keyboard as well, but just playing the chords, and then you can do whatever you want with the melodies. So
actually, I was curious about that. Is there any specific influence in your singing style?
So I was classically trained, like Western classical music,
Mm-hmm.
and I think, I sang country, sang pop. Also, my parents, like I was telling you guys, they're from India, and so I was growing up listening to, like, Indian film soundtracks in the car
sure.
and at home, and I definitely think that's something I picked up by ear. I'm not trained in Indian music, but I definitely think it's an influence, and a lot of people...
I definitely heard it in the work which you were probably listening to on this podcast. You can hear that slight little touch, and it was a very interesting fusion, considering that I don't often hear that with an acoustic guitar, and it's just, that's different. Never been done, as far as I know.
That's what I'm hoping for, that it just has its own unique thing.
Yeah.
My next question about the album is, so are all the tracks written already?
Yes.
So you're just in the process of recording it?
Yes, we're rehearsing to record, so really tightening the arrangements,
Sure.
Really knowing the instrumentation, what else we want to bring in. I am right now a 4-person band. I play acoustic, lead guitar, drummer, and bass, but then we're on some of the songs, I'm wondering, maybe a cello can guest star,
Oh, cool.
or, maybe a different kind of percussion, so
Awesome.
really working that out in detail.
Great. And so, and you said the projected release is December.
Yeah, December, January, because we're hitting, coming into the holidays, so I don't want to, I think, December, January is a safe bet.
And so I'm curious, because I haven't actually had a chance to ask an artist who doesn't really have an album out, a full-length album out. A lot of artists I know who are more independent or more self-driven release on Bandcamp or iTunes or wherever else. Do you have a main platform you're planning on releasing on, or are you going to...
Well, I do have a CD, Rainstorm, that's
Right,
available
sure.
on iTunes.
Oh,
You
it is
can
on
get
iTunes, okay.
And on CD Baby, and I believe on Amazon as well.
Oh, cool.
So, that's an EP, it's 6 songs. And this next one I'm going to have on CD, and I'm going to have it be on iTunes, and
cool.
and on my website as well.
Sure.
Which is...
Was Rainstorm your first release ever?
I did a 4-track acoustic thing right before that, and then Rainstorm was like the full production, working with the producer in LA.
Interesting.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, where you said you were a cover band.
Oh, what did you
I got to
play?
bring this up. What did you cover?
Well, was I talking about Texas or here? In Texas?
Here, when you traveled first to here.
No, I'm trying to think.
Right before you started writing your
there
own
was
music.
actually it's somebody. I was. To me, a cover band, I guess there was a guitarist who used to write songs, and I would sing the songs that he wrote. Because it was before I was writing,
Gotcha.
Okay.
and I thought other people wrote. So I was singing his songs.
Gotcha. Okay.
I was.
He's thinking
I was
cover
re-
band like you were covering Madonna's song
Oh.
or something.
I did in high school.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Are there do your parents have embarrassing videos of you singing Madonna songs?
They might.
In the YouTube culture,
That might
you never
be
know.
quite a releasing value.
Yeah, I'm saying, especially it's very specifically related to today's episode.
That could be your next album, a nostalgic Madonna cover.
Yeah,
I would do a side project at best.
Acoustic, nostalgic Madonna cover. You got to add in the word acoustic.
An acoustic.
There, sure.
Acoustic? All right, sure.
There we
Whatever.
go.
Yeah.
Are there other genres you are interested in dabbling in? Heavy rock, punk, or pop, or doo-wop, or do you kind of just like the place you're in?
I'm really curious about. There are definitely different genres. I mean, I sang a lot of standards in high school and stuff, so that those are an influence. And sometimes I'll hear something like bossa nova or Astrud Gilberto, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's it's really great stuff.
Yeah.
And I've sung that stuff too. I did cover in high school. I was part of this band that did like Indian filmy music, so that was like a different little thing that we did.
Oh, cool.
That is the most interesting cover I've ever heard of.
So there was like country in school, and then after school there was these group of kids that we'd get together and just sing that stuff. So I feel like these are all different influences. I really like I mentioned country, and yes, and I like the blues too, and I actually have a blues song that's going to be on this upcoming album.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And I really like classical music. I don't sing it anymore, but I was, a soprano, and I don't think I'm going to do an original classical, album, but it's something that was definitely an influence. And
That's funny. Apparently, behind this album today, True Blue, that was supposed to be the big thing for this album, is that it included a lot of classical influence, which I imagine was found in the first track, and again also the fourth.
Yeah, sure.
I assumed that those string swells were taken from classical origins. So again, you could sort of feed that into your music in the oddest of ways.
Right. I mean, that's where I'm kind of hearing the cello on some of the tracks, and that
Yeah.
I think I could bring those in, and it would work well. It would work effectively.
Well, yeah, and
Could get you inspired to seek out session musicians.
yeah, and I think that adding that kind of an extra level to acoustic music really kind of gives it a depth
Yeah.
that really makes it stand out and pop, and that's really I really like when acoustic guitars are accompanied by other string instruments, especially because it adds a different kind of dichotomy and depth to a song.
Well, you have to have like a central. If you're going to have a central instrument, you might as well have things like framing it in the background.
Sure.
So I think very often acoustic guitar, it stands on its own, but sometimes it just begs to have the support.
Well, we'll definitely have to try and have you back on in the new year to promote the new record.
That'd be great. Yeah.
But I'm very grateful that you came on the show today and picked such a great, fun record that I hadn't actually listened to in its entirety in a while. So
I'm glad you guys were open to it, and I really loved what you guys had to say. So that was great.
we always like that.
One thing, we would like an advanced copy of this new record coming out.
Absolutely.
Don't hit me.
Without question, I'd be happy to
It
share
would
that
be
with you
all-
guys.
Beggar.
Don't hit me.
Not beggar.
I'm suggesting.
Of course, this also leads back to I met you through the Way Station and your performance there, which was what blew me away and made me want to pursue you for the podcast.
you.
How did you discover the Way Station as a music venue? I'm always curious to hear, and I haven't really been able to ask a lot of musicians. So I've had my fiance's band, the Wasties, on, and they've practically lived at the bar and they formed at the bar, so that's why they perform there. But how did you discover the Way Station?
I was playing a lot in the city at Rockwood Music Hall, and I live in Brooklyn, and I have a lot of Brooklyn friends, and they're always like, "Can you play in the city?" And I'm like, "The East Village really isn't that far." And so I literally one day just sat down and typed in like top music venues in Brooklyn, and the Way Station came up, the Rock Shop came up. There was a couple of places in Williamsburg, but I was like, one of my Brooklyn friends. I was like, I'm not going to Williamsburg. I live in a different part of Brooklyn, so it was. And I emailed them and sent them a link to my website and my tracks. And within a week, they both called me back, and I had shows at the Rock Shop and the Way Station within
very
a few
cool.
months. Yeah,
That's
so
awesome.
it was really great. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to just play in Brooklyn. So.
And it's kind of cool to hear that the Way Station's, because that's what Andy set out to do by having music almost every single night, is he wants to be a music venue
Right.
as well as a bar, and the fact that he's established it that much is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I played there in March, and then Andy came up to me right after the show and wanted me to be part of the Prospect Heights Music Festival. So
I remember, yeah.
So that was, it was really great. It's great to have community relations. I really think that's a wonderful space for art to grow, and when you can go into a space where you feel like, people are looking forward to seeing you and really create and take risks and keep going back and having a great time. In the end, this is really about sharing and having a good time.
Sure, and it's a great environment for musicians too, which is what I really enjoy going to see shows there. Is that it's about the music and it's also about having a good time.
Yeah.
But it's not like we only have this kind of music there. You could hear country, acoustic, folk, pop, funk. There's a really great funk band I saw there a little while ago. I can't remember the name of now, but also like I've heard rap there, like everything, and I think that's really
probably
nice.
The best thing about living in New York City, period, is
It's
you're bound
diversity.
to find a niche for whatever music you're doing at that time.
Yeah, and that's not something you can find everywhere, which is one of the greatest things about living here, is being able to experience music on that level, and pretty easily too. I mean, the Way Station doesn't charge a cover; it's just it's tip driven, and people support local music, and it's really cool to see that.
That was smart avoiding Williamsburg, though, because you never know what you're going to get there.
That's very true.
It's dangerous.
Do you have any specific projects or shows you want to promote coming up?
Right now, the CD is the next
big
CD
thing?
is the big thing. Recording. You know, we were at B&H last week looking at mics or singing into mics and listening. So it's really about getting down to the technical stuff, making sure we have all the right stuff, and looking at studios and seeing what they have to record drums. So we're right in the technical nitty gritty of recording. Hopefully, we're going to record this month. If not, then early November. So
Cool.
if I have a show, I'll definitely let you know about
Absolutely,
it.
we'll definitely promote it on the show. Do you plan on going out on tour?
I'll see. I really feel like I would be interested in touring places where I feel like I already have a following. I used to live in LA, and then maybe Dallas and Chicago. It's just going to depend. It depends on how the CD release here goes, because I'm not sure if going to a city where nobody knows you and playing your songs is really.
Well, yeah, with the social media generation now, you can build an audience before you even get there, and I think that's a big help.
Speaking of social media, are we going to see any videos or anything like that for this new album?
Yes, that is something that I would really like to do. I have a music video right now on my website, and it's very popular. It's one of my other songs called "Make Believe."
I saw that. That was on the front page of the
Yeah.
website. Yep.
It's
I
a fun
I
video.
enjoyed that.
I really like that one.
Oh, good. So that's I'd love to keep a visual parallel to some of my songs, and I would. The goal is to record to shoot a music video to probably in the new year after the release.
Any story behind the making of that music video and how the idea came?
I was living in LA, and one of my neighbors was a DP, and we talked about working together, and we actually were talking about a film, because I think I told you guys I act too, and then we were music, and music videos are like these tiny little films. There's like a 5-minute project as opposed to writing a screenplay for a 20-minute. It's like,
Sure.
okay, how about a music video? And he really loved that idea, and I gave him free reign. I'm like, I'll be the producer on this, you do. And he's like, well, I see a chicken and a bear. I was like, all right, let's do it. So I drove.
That could not have been a better answer.
And I picked up the costumes and
And a copy of Monopoly.
yes, and the Oprah magazine, and we went in a lot of liquor bottles, and that's where we went from.
There you go.
Very cool. Well, again, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. It's been a blast, and we look forward to hearing the new record and having you back then.
That's right. It's not begging. It's not begging, as John said.
I just like giving him a hard time.
Pre-promotion.
But it truly has been a blast to have you on and to get to know you a little better. It's a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see you perform again.
Thank you.
And-
I'd love to share my website with
Sure,
everybody.
go for it. Absolutely.
No, plug away, please.
No, I just want because I've had a really great time here, and I know Matt and I are friends on Facebook, so it's easy to find each other. And I'm at everythingrashmi.com.
Mm-hmm. Where I got that.
And my name is spelled Rashmi, and that's also my Facebook page, facebook.com/everythingrashmi. If you hear us today on Crash Chords, give my Facebook page a like, and I will send you a free song.
All right.
Ooh.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well,
Very
Just
cool.
mention on the Facebook page, after you give me a like, just say, heard you on Crash Chords, and I'll be happy to send you a free song.
cool.
Very cool.
And we'll plug the website and link it in the post.
Yeah, and yeah, again, I'm just very thankful for you to be so open to this. I mean, I pretty much approached you. Here's the thing I do. Do you want to do it? And you've been very receptive.
And you didn't yell out stranger danger, which is what Matt usually gets.
Yeah, sure. But and we'll definitely, of course, send you the link once the show goes up on Thursday, and feel free to share it wherever.
I will, absolutely.
So, thank you. I like mutual artist promotion. It's really the future of social media and artistry in general. So I like to help, especially local artists. If I like your music, I want the world to hear it.
Right. No, this is what I was saying earlier. I think really it's a community effort. So I personally have a lot of I have a lot of faith in community relationships, and I think that's really the way to go with arts.
Yeah. Because if people
today.
like your stuff, they'll promote it.
Yeah, well, they'll just talk about. It's
Yeah.
like it's who's in your community, and you want everybody to thrive. And it's like, oh, I know that guy personally, so yeah, he's got a podcast, and I'm happy to recommend that because I know about it.
It's almost exclusively how we've operated at the moment.
So this is a good place to head into the wrap up before I talk about next week. Steve has... So we do a thing that we had not prepared you for. We only get a very limited fan mail at the moment. So we read spam email comments that come in on the website because, robots are funny. So Steve will give us one of his spam emails.
The trick is really at entertaining media to learn many new units. Offer them in your luck. However, there is a great casino adventure does not always have that conversation. The level is varied and pretty entertaining and harmless way of containing multiple balls. In this game may necessitate the persistent and fast learner players in order to trigger the appropriate forum thread and soon Windows Mobile. These console-style games, were limited in scope by the University of Texas at Austin Department of Computer Sciences, where would make Windows Mobile 6.
And the author of said brilliance?
By Farmville 2 cheat tool password.
Well, that wasn't even about Farmville.
Nope.
It was about
Doesn't need to
mobile.
be.
No, it was about mobile gaming and what society is coming to. That
Shut up, John.
We're spending
John-
all this faux
John
money.
thinks it's
No,
funny to
it was-
break down the email
Spam emails?
like we break down
I
music.
usually do a damn good job if you stop interrupting me.
So, the final song that Rashmi is going to play for us is called Shadows, which is after we leave you here. We will end with that. But first, I would like Rashmi to do our sign-off, if she wouldn't mind.
Wait, no, we forgot the album.
Oh, album for next week.
we
I'm
have
sorry.
an album next week.
So, yes, we have an album next week. Shocker. We do an album every week. But this one is special because it's our first fan-submitted request that wasn't someone either of us knew previously.
And last week I did not read a spam mail, I read a fan mail.
From
which is what
Jose,
should
who
happen.
also goes by Knockjaw on the internet. He recommended a album called Ohio by the band Daryl, in all caps and bracketed. We've not heard it yet, but thank you, Jose, for the recommendation. We're going to do it next week. We will send you the link personally once that show goes up next week as well. But we're excited to hear something new recommended by a fan.
Yup.
I think that sums it up. So if you would take us before your performance of Shadows with our sign-off, and we will see you all next week, Internet.
Thank you, everyone. Music is life, and life is good.
You got yourself up against a wall. I wanna help you. I can't reach that far. Shadows play hide and seek with the evening light. Sunlight tries to hold her place, but gives into the night. don't see